Hi, this video is designed to give you some information about me as a teacher that students in the past have found helpful. I'm shooting this with photo booth effect that kind of stretches out my face for a couple of reasons. One is that I want to make the video memorable and entertaining, and I want to underscore some basic things that I think about myself as a teacher, and I think that this visual is going to help you to remember those things. You'll notice that as I'm talking, I'm moving my head kind of back and forth, and you'll see my eyes moving up and down. Having this effect really helps to force me to stay still, which is hard for me to do as a teacher and as a person, partly because I have ADHD, which means that I don't have the same kind of impulse control that a normal person has, that I tend to focus more on big ideas and less on details and kind of slide through things. And actually, having my face on this helps me to be able to look at the screen and keep my head more still, which paradoxically can make it easier to pay attention to me. Um, in addition to having ADHD, I'm also dyslexic and have a circulatory problem in my hands. All those things combined mean that I've got really poor handwriting. I also taught myself how to write in English because I first learned how to write in Greece, uh, going to Greek schools. So I read a lot of things upside down. In terms of how that affects you, that means you're going to get a lot of your feedback in video and audio form, not necessarily in typed form, not necessarily written. Um, it also means that I make a fair amount of typos, although I work on it as much as I can. And I that's not an excuse, but I just want you to be aware that if I am making a typo, that's not necessarily something that I'm doing that because I'm rude, although it might seem that I'm being really rude or disrespectful. It's actually something that is kind of beyond my control, although I do my best to keep it under my control. So I just want you to be aware of that. The other reason I wanted to use this video setting when I'm making the video is to underscore something about me as a teacher that students find it helpful to know. That I don't necessarily think being confused is a bad thing. That my assumption about a lot of students is that you wouldn't be here in my class if you weren't pretty good at being a student. If you weren't pretty good at being in school, you wouldn't have made it to where you are. Being a good student isn't necessarily the same thing as being as actually learning things. So some of the time, I might give you an assignment that will feel confusing, and it'll be confusing because I've just made a mistake. Maybe because of ADHD, maybe because it was just oh, I couldn't see that coming. Some of the time, though, things might seem confusing, and that confusion can be part of the learning process. That a certain degree of confusion can force you to really pay attention to what's happening and not give you the ability to just fall back onto your patterns. And that a lot of what I believe about communication is that communication doesn't just describe the world. It's not just about taking a packet of information from inside of my head and then sending it over these wires and then having it go inside of your head, and hopefully when you open it, you're going to have something that looks more or less like what was in the packet of information that was in my head. That sometimes communication works like that, but more often than not, it doesn't. More often than not, when we communicate with each other, we are co-creating the world. And we don't have an infinite amount of influence. There are all kinds of cultural factors that come into play that are beyond our control. But within that, we do have some control over the world that we live in. So there are a lot of things about me as a teacher that a lot of my students tend to like, and guess where I got them from? Previous students. Right? I really value students that engage with me and that give me ideas about how I can teach better, especially if those ideas are about how I can help more students meet the learning objectives for the course. I can't necessarily be your therapist or your life teacher, but it is my goal to help you learn as much as you can about the course that we're in. Now, grading and communicating about a course are very complex forms of communication. So I am when I'm communicating with you about a course or about a grade, you're also talking to my previous students. And I hope that you will be like the vast majority of the students that I've had since I've been a teacher, who have really engaged with me in a way that helps me to meet folks where they're at and helps us to kind of co-create a learning environment. So for example, I now use a lot of course wikis, which I didn't before. And I've found that that really helps students to keep track of what's happening in my courses and helps a lot more students learn. And so I'm really happy to embrace it. I've also started to create a lot more videos because those videos, students have told me, really help you all to get concepts, and it can be easier on a lot of you than reading text because you're not necessarily primarily literate creatures as much as you are electorate creatures, and that you're creatures where digital ways of knowing and thinking are more native to you. So I hope that you will engage my course with as much enthusiasm as you can. Now, the main thing that I'm hoping you're going to get out of this video is just from the principle of looking at me kind of being a talking head. There have inevitably been times when this cheesy video effect you have found distracting. There may have occasionally been times when you found it interesting. I'd encourage you to think about this as a metaphor for what it can often be like to engage with me as a teacher. And while it is my goal to keep myself as still as possible, to keep everything as straightforward as possible, to help you meet the learning objectives as much as you can, inevitably there are things that happen that you will find distracting and that might be a challenge for you. And you may be tempted to think about me as a villain, as someone who is standing between you and whatever goal you need to get. And I'd encourage you to think about me as someone who is really trying my best to help you within the confines of what I can do, and to embrace some of the chaos, to embrace some of the play with as much enthusiasm as you can. Most students who've taken my classes have found that embracing the little bit of chaos that can happen from me as a teacher, if they do it earnestly and do it from the beginning of the course, that they are rewarded, and rewarded not just in terms of having the grade results that they need, but they're rewarded in terms of learning things that they find really help them in their life, and they're rewarded with the satisfaction of having made the world a little bit more the kind of place that they want to be in. And the more you embrace the course as it's set up, and the more you communicate with me, the better you will help me to help not only you, but to help students in the future meet those learning objectives. If you are confused, there are two types of confusion. And one type of confusion is what I like to think of as muscle pain. Those of you who work out, like if I'm a runner, or I try to be, if your muscle hurts, that means it's been broken down and that it's going to be getting stronger, and that can be a good thing, right? If your brain hurts in that way, where you're being stretched and you're really having to think about things in a different way, and you're getting an idea that makes you kind of go, whoa, what just happened? That can be a good thing. There are other types of confusion that are like ligament pain. That type of confusion is just, you're beating yourself up. You're feeling really down. You don't have an idea of even where to begin. That type of confusion, that's not a place that I want you to be in. So sometimes some of it's inevitable. I'm a limited human being with limited resources, working in an institution that has increasingly limited resources. But if you keep in mind that my goal is for you to have the first kind of confusion, that muscle confusion, that kind of confusion that is breaking things down and then to help support you in building things back up, so that by the time you get done with the course, you don't just have a new set of ideas, but you've got a brain that has new neural pathways, new connections, new possibilities for being. And we try and avoid that other kind, right? So the second kind of confusion would be just like, oh no, when is this thing due? I don't know when that's due, and I don't know where to look for it. That kind of confusion we want to avoid as much as possible. But if you're confused about that, the best way to let me know is usually through the link on the wiki, because if you share it with me on the wiki, then everybody else in class can also see that link and can also have access to it. So if you get nothing else out of this video, I hope that you capture the idea that while I am sometimes confusing and sometimes a little bit strange, that my goal really is to help you to learn that this will require you embracing the positive kind of confusion and working with me to help eliminate the secondary kind of confusion. Thanks for your time.